right. All right, welcome to Making Music. Once again, our show is on Mapex drums, and today we're going to talk about snare drums. And the snare drums are a pretty integral part of the music. That was little Buddy Rich type of stuff we got there. I've got Steve Jacobs with me from Mapex, Regional Sales Manager, right?
Right.
Okay, on my right. And on my left, I've got Chris Sears, Guitar Showcase Drum Manager and SMI Instructor. And last week we talked about the drum sets, we talked about tuning, and you said you would save the snare drum tuning for this show. So let's talk about that just a little bit.
Chris, if you don't mind, my preference, and it's personal for everyone because different people have different tastes and stuff, my preference is to tune the bottom of the snare drum head at least as tight as the top head, or in my case, a little tighter. I find that it makes the snares themselves sound a little more lively, and it's just a little crisper, a little sweeter sound. But again, different people have different tastes. Chris, what's your take on snare drum tuning?
Well, like you said, a snare drum is a really personal, this is as personal as it gets for a drum set. For a drummer. Your snare drum, this is where it's at. So some guys, you could like your snare drum looser, like a really big fat sound, like it tighter, like Steve does, right in the middle. And one of the things we're going to talk about is different snare drums you could use, because some guys, really prefer the sound of like a piccolo. Or some guys, this is a brass drum, where this is a wood drum. It's a lot thicker, and it's got a larger diameter. Same thing with this.
Okay, now this brass drum, and you call it a piccolo, is that because it's so small?
Right.
It's kind of thin?
Now this one, it's not only a thinner shell on it, but it's also smaller by an inch in diameter. So, I mean, the great thing about this drum is that, you got the brass shell of it, and the thinness and the diameter of the shell is going to give you a nice crack. So not only do a lot of guys use these as their main snare drum, but some people also use them as an auxiliary snare drum, and that's something that's been around a long time that a lot of guys don't think about.
Both in one set.
Right.
Okay.
Having either the wood snare drum as your main snare drum, and this as your auxiliary, or the opposite. Like if you're going to be playing rock and roll, this would make a perfect snare drum for you.
Right.
Or if you're going to be playing bass and drums and jungle music, something like this.
So if you go back and forth, can you go back and forth just a little bit?
Oh, yeah.
Show us the difference in sound here.
I mean, a lot of the piccolo sound is going to be, when guys are playing it. Where when you're playing a big, wood snare drum, you could do all the fancy rolls and stuff, but a lot of times you want that sound, so you just got that nice backbeat to it, And you could tune it differently, so not only do you get, with the snare drum, it's the only drum with snares on it, obviously, and you could tune it so you have those snares sound a certain way. Like on this snare drum, for example, this is a Ryan series snare drum. It's got the die-cast hoops, so really heavy-duty hoops, so you could play, when you're playing cross-stick on the drum, you get a nice click, as opposed to sometimes you want a different sounding rim, like this one. Pretty close, these two.
Yeah, there's definitely a difference.
There's a difference there. And on like this snare drum, you could adjust the snares on the bottom on both sides, so you could adjust them evenly. So some guys, like their snare drum to rattle, and get that. And that's kind of the older vintage style, sound of drumming. So, back in the, 40s, a lot of drums sound like that. You couldn't get them to sound like that. These weren't around.
Yeah, they didn't exist. Well, now, Steve, you got a pretty fancy looking one here. I see a lot of, is this real gold plating on this hardware?
It really is. It's 24 karat gold plating, Gary. This is a very unique snare drum on the market today. This is a 100% cherry what they call deep forest Black Panther snare drum. If you notice the hoops are die cast, of course, as opposed to the ones that Chris was pointing out, which are what we call our 2.3 millimeter power hoops, which are a strong hoop as well. But this particular drum here is unique in that for the money, there are very, very few. I can't think of any other manufacturers that are offering 100% cherry wood snare drum for, like I say, for the money.
So all the plies are cherry wood?
It's all cherry.
It's
100% cherry. And if you notice too, you mentioned the gold-plated lugs, the die-cast hoops are gold-plated, as well as the snares themselves are actually gold-plated too. So it's just really a beautiful, aesthetically pleasing drum. It's just gorgeous.
Yeah, it's gorgeous.
Fantastic
And there's also
sounding too.
yeah, it's got a nice sound. It really does. Cherry tends to have a little brighter tone than its sister snare drum down here, which is also unique and unusual. Gary, can you hold those sticks, please? This is a 6.5 by 14 all 100% walnut snare. So if you'll notice, it's a little thicker, a little deeper than the cherry snare here, but this is also part of the Deep Forest series. These are available in different sizes, from a piccolo, somewhat like Chris has there, to a 5.5 by 14 to a 6.5 by 14. And if you'll notice, the hardware is black nickel, so it's a black chrome feature as far as the hardware goes. But this particular wood here is quite a bit richer in tone. It's just a deeper fundamental sound than cherry or maple or whatever. But anyway, so these are both part of the Deep Forest series, and they have some unique features that are really unusual for the money.
Now, how do all of these? I know these are all for regular drum kits. How do they differ from like a marching snare drum? I mean, that's what kids mostly see.
Right.
At school, they strap this thing on and they go down the road.
well, a marching snare drum's like carrying around a floor tom on your back, right?
It's huge.
It's not
deep.
only does it have a 14 or sometimes a 15-inch diameter, that it's going to be really deep. It's going to be anywhere from 8 to 12 inches.
They do that for volume.
And it's not only for volume, but the sound that you're going to get, the punchiness. Marching snares, very brittle sound. There's nothing but attack, and it's because they're playing at speeds faster than anyone could actually recognize with their regular ear on something like this. It kind of just get a what's the right word? It would blend in, and you wouldn't hear the distinct accents and strokes that they're playing. So a snare like this is mainly for a drum set as opposed to someone marching.
Well, did you ever play a marching snare? Or
Yeah, I played I swear my back would hurt some days when I get
How about
done.
you?
yeah, I've had my share of experience.
So you had to do that too.
Yep. And Gary, like we were talking about earlier, these are all different snare drums from different families. A Deep Forest series, like Chris is playing on, or has these two Orion series. Chris, can you hold this snare drum up and show the actual figuring in the shell? Look how beautiful. The camera can get a good shot of that. It's that's an all maple snare drum, but the outer ply, 6-ply maple, but the outer ply is burl wood. And it's really, really, I mean, look at that.
It is beautiful.
It's just a gorgeous snare drum. And that's part of the Orion series. I mean, we have full drum sets.
The whole set would look
the
like
whole
that?
set looks
yeah,
just
would
like
match
that.
just like this other set matches.
Right,
Okay.
and however, this is the only one that has that burl wood exterior, and
beautiful.
but we're really proud of that particular color. In fact, actually, I think Chris had one of his tom-toms around here earlier that's really a dramatic look.
Yeah.
That
And
one
Chris,
you
hold
played
this one
earlier.
here too. This is also part of the Orion family. This particular one has black chrome hardware on it. This is more of a, there you go, more of a blonde. There you go. That shows the figuring also, if you can see that as well.
So that's black chrome hardware and,
Black-
and kind
black
of a,
chrome, right. It's
what do you
antique-
call that finish?
I think it's antique
Antique ivory.
Yeah.
Okay, that's beautiful.
And it's really got a nice figuring to it. And again, it's part of the array of different snare drums. Now these are at the high end as far as snare drums that Mapex offer. We also have snare drums that are generally in three different family types as far as materials. We have brass, we have phosphor bronze, we also have maple snares. And we have a series below the Black Panther in terms of price point called a Pro Series, Gary. And those are, again, there's a stainless steel, there's a brass, and there is a stainless steel, brass, and maple in the Pro Series. And those are moderately priced. And like Chris was saying earlier, all of our drum sets, all Mapex drum sets ship with wooden snares. And so with the Black Panthers and some of the Pro Series snares, it offers the
You can
drummer
get a different voice.
Yeah, you get a different voice.
know?
So it gives you an alternative kind of a sound, from a real warm wood sound to a real nice crack of either brass or steel or phosphor bronze. So it's really just a matter of what suits your taste, and like Chris was saying, in terms of different sizes available, the different metals, the different woods that are available. I mean, there's so many different options as far as snare drums go.
So basically, you can have whatever kit and various snares, just like a guitar player would bring different guitars to a gig.
Right.
Okay. Exactly right.
And now this one, it's smaller. What size is this?
This is a 12 by 7. This is
It's deeper. Okay.
yeah. This is I'm gonna get it off the stand here. This is a
maple and cherry, right?
yeah. This is a 12 by 7 popcorn snare, which is part of the Pro M package as a feature, add-on feature, value added. And yeah, thanks.
This way a little bit. Right, there you go. Can get it.
And this is 12 by 7. It's all maple with a cherry wood veneer exterior, and it comes along with all Pro M sets, with the exception of our classic series, which comes with a free set of bags.
It's like a soprano snare. It's a 12-inch diameter, so
Good point.
it's actually in between a regular-sized snare drum and a piccolo snare drum.
Okay.
So you get a good amount of depth, but a smaller diameter on
Let's
it.
hear this guy. So how does it sound?
Well, this one hasn't. I don't think we took the time to tune this that well, but it does have a nice tonal. Hold that key. So yeah, not a bad little snare.
It's different, you know.
And this is right out of the box. It really hasn't been tuned. So, but we wanted to show it because it's kind of unique in terms of what it is.
Well, let's tune up a snare now. That's because we haven't really. I mean,
Yeah.
you've done that a little bit.
Chris?
Well, with tuning a snare drum, there's a lot of different factors. So I'm gonna get this out of my way, and I'm gonna show you on the Orion series snare. So I have one of these snare drums, and it's really great. I've found that it's just a nice, warm sound for your snare. You could tighten it up and get a good crack, but I'm gonna tune it right now, and the way I'm gonna tune it is so it's gonna be like a good backbeat, like just a pocket snare drum, right? Something you'd hear like a snare drum sound like on a radio or something like that. So first thing you wanna do is take off the snares, so you're not going to hear the snare drum rattle, and you do that by the throw off right here, and this will just let the snares lower so they're not pressing up against the head. Now you want to use the same concept like we were on the last show, where you want to go across on the snare drum. So this is the top side. This typically has, 99% of the time it's going to have a coated drum head. You could use other heads, but for anyone that played jazz or just any style of music, typically you want to go with a coated head. It's got a little more warmth than a clear head does. So the bottom of the snare, this head is extremely thin. This is the bottom snare side, and there's a lot of different ways to tune up your snare drum, but instead of doing it evenly, like you would on your toms, the way I'm going to show you, which keep in mind there's a lot of different types of ways to tune up your snare drum, but the way I'm going to show you is how you can kind of get a good crisp sound out of your snares, and the way you do that is by tuning, you just finger, basically you use your fingers to feel the tension of the drum, and you want to tighten it and leave these two sides, right, away from the snares. You want to tighten these sides up and leave these a little looser. So I'm going to do that really quick. It's actually already kind of done. You play on this, you tune this snare up?
Yeah, I think.
That's good. Not his first day on the job.
So after you do that, you flip it over, and then you want to do the same thing you would on tom, and that's trying to match up the tones on the different sides of the drums. The snare drum, this snare in particular, has 10 lugs. So depending on the amount of lugs that you have on your snare drum, you're going to go a different pattern. So it's if you had 6 lugs, you go in kind of a star pattern, right? And if you have 10, you basically just want to make sure you're always going across from each other. So we'll hit this side, and you could hear a distinct pitch difference. So we're going to tighten that one up a little. go to the other side. Now we don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to leave it like that. That's a basic concept that you want to use, and then the next part that's just as important is adjusting the snare tension on your snares. Now, a lot of people look past this and they just put their snares on. They say, nah, that sounds good. You want to take the time to adjust it. So in this case, I'm going to make it so the snares are going to have a very quick decay on them when you're playing on the center of the drum, or when you play on the edge of the drum, it's going to have a little bit of rattle. So when you want to accent a certain way, you get that higher pitch. And the way you do that is you go ahead and you loosen the snares with a throw off, and then you slowly tighten them up. And you want to tighten it to just when they stop rattling. So when you're getting that big poppy sound from the center of the drum. Now, right there. Now, this is a little higher than I want it to be, but you get the basic idea that in the center, the snares are very quick. Now, you slowly do that because now on the edge, they're going to have that ring. So, I mean, that's a great thing.
Well, now tell me, if you go too far, is it like a guitar string where you could actually break something?
Well, I wouldn't say you could break it. It's very, very hard to break something on a drum set, but if you did go too far, it would choke the drum. So right now it sounds like this. I tightened it up, and this snare, I'm going to tighten it evenly on both sides. And if you tighten it up, it's basically just going to choke the drum. Right? Now, some guys like that sound. If you're in a marching band or something, that's kind of how it'd be. But you know, it depends on the tuning situation. And like I said, on a snare drum in particular, there's lots of different ways to tune a snare. And you know, everyone has their different voice. And you want to make sure to find your own voice, and you know, basically just give the feel that you're putting into the drums. You want to express it the best way you can. So definitely take the time to tune up your set and get the sound that you want out of your drums.
Okay, cool. And Steve, you've got another Black Panther here. Metal?
Gary, this is metal. This is phosphor bronze, actually. I'm not sure if the camera can get a good shot of this, but this is actually a hammered. It's a hammered
it's
shell.
Beautiful. I mean, it's
thing. So yeah, it's a beautiful drum. It has the black chrome hardware on it, but
and it's phosphor bronze shell.
Yes, sir. Whenever you hammer a shell, can you get a shot of the interior?
Oh yeah,
you
can
go.
See that. Yeah.
Boy, it's really dramatic. When you whenever you hammer a shell like this, it tends to dry out the overall ring qualities, and so it doesn't require nearly as much dampening as does, like, say, a full-on unhammered, wide-open bell, brass snare drum, which sounds like a bell. I mean, it really has a lot of resonance. Sure. So this is quite a bit drier sounding. We have hammered series in phosphor bronze. We have brass. We also have stainless steel, and I think Chris has the counterpart stainless steel little piccolo.
Stainless steel.
Again, you can see
right over here.
With die-cast hoops.
Yeah, die-cast hoops. This is a piccolo again. And it's got a hammered shell, and all the hammered series drums that Mapex have are just really not only beautiful but sound fantastic.
Well, let's hear these guys.
This is actually part of your store stock, Gary. So I think Chris has been working on the tuning in this. So it doesn't have quite as much ring as a non-hammered snare.
Sounds great.
A nice pop. Chris, let's hear your piccolo again, if you don't mind.
Actually, grab me my snare
drum.
Sure. Now, not only do I have one of these Orion series, which is a wood drum, but like I said, a lot of guys.
You're as bad as guitar players, I'll tell you.
This weighs a ton, doesn't it?
It weighs quite a bit.
This is actually a hand-hammered brass die-cast hoops, and it's got a basically a finish like a drum set would. It's got an antique finish on it, and that's just for the looks. And you can see that the head on here is pretty worn. I've been playing it a good amount. But both these snares just have, you know, here's a good example of the two different, you know, materials that they're constructed out of. And they have a much different sound. This snare drum, I love it, but I use it when I want to play really loud. And that's because it's made out of brass, and brass is one of the louder, you know, more piercing, drums out there. Where I think that drum is just, you know, a very balanced, dry sound, like you were saying, very, you know, articulate.
And one thing too, Chris, we need to make this clear to the viewing public. This particular drum was a very special, limited edition drum that was only available last year. And I think you got one of the first or the last. Or you one of the...
I got one of them.
Yeah, so. Unfortunately, those are no longer.
We don't necessarily come in to showcase and ask for.
Yeah,
that
particular drum there is special.
But let's hear. Can you play some and then you play some? We'll hear the difference between the two.
Absolutely.
You guys go back and forth a little bit.
All right.
Sure.
Okay.
Anyway.
Well, those sound great, I tell you. So there is a distinct difference between a lot of these drums.
It really is.
I mean, it's interesting to see the differences. So what else can you tell us about snare drums? So basically we have wooden ones, we have metal, we have hand hammered, you've got the different sizes, we got piccolo snares, which are these little bitty guys.
Yep.
Okay, and so that signifies the size more than anything else. And what else is there to tell about snare drums? I mean, the tuning is very important. You guys have both, you tune them a little differently.
I do. You know, Gary, one other thing that we need to mention is this snare drum sitting behind Chris, that elusive Pro M snare back there. This is a snare drum that is not necessarily designed to be an aftermarket snare. It actually comes with a drum set called our Classic Series. And that's a 7 by 14-inch snare. And it seems like that there seems to have been a trend in the past few years of drummers going a little larger sizes, a little deeper things. So along with that particular snare drum, pardon me, also comes a 20 by 22-inch bass drum. So it's a 7 by 14 all maple, here we go, all maple snare, coupled with a 20 by 22-inch bass drum. So this guy here would have a distinct, real full-bodied wooden kind of a sound.
And so
yeah, so for a rocker, as your mainstay as far as a snare drum, this would do the job. Coupled with that 20 by 22-inch bass drum, man, I mean.
Sounds great. And that's actually comes on one of the lower end kits.
No, this is actually a kind of a semi-professional kit or professional kit.
Okay.
The Pro M this is the Classic Series, Pro M Classic.
All right. So they all.
And by the way, this is also a moderately priced drum set, but it's lacquer as opposed to being a wrapped finish. It's a full-on lacquer sparkle. It's available in this what they call Bermuda Blue Sparkle and also Platinum Sparkle. Just a little bit askew over here on this side. Anyway, but this is a little larger, little different, unique snare. It also has a 2.3 millimeter power hoops on it, and
it's got a lot of depth to it.
It's got a lot of.
It's got a big sound.
And it's a bigger drum, so I guess.
It really does.
So that's interesting. It's kind of like guitar bodies. If the the big dreadnoughts have a lot different tone.
Exactly. And also, like we were discussing earlier too, Gary, in the previous show, these would have, a lifetime warranty on the shell and the 5-year warranty on the hardware as well. So, and
all
again,
of these, or just the?
All of them.
Okay, so all of these.
Yeah. So again, Mapex doesn't outsource anything. They're making everything in-house, and so the warranties that apply to the drum sets also apply to the snare drums. So again, 5-year warranty on the parts, that is to say, the hardware, and then a lifetime warranty on the shell. So again, then that warranty refers to not necessarily abuse, you know, if somebody abuses something, but if you have any ply separations, which we have very few problems with that.
Stripped threads or anything like that?
That would be warranted.
I know that's a pain on some of the real low-end drum kits. They're bad right out of the box.
Yeah,
the threads are.
I've actually been amazed that we haven't had that problem with Mapex.
Yeah.
And one of the other things to mention really quickly is that not only do the Saturn and the Orion series feature the Remo coated ambassadors on top and on the snare side, but so does the Black Panther snare drums.
Right.
So you're getting drum heads instead of, you know, a lot of manufacturers manufacture their own drum heads and then you'd replace them after a couple weeks. That you now don't have to. You're saving that extra, you know, money on this initial purchase,
right. So
instead of having to replace
we don't have to do that.
And you know something else too, that's a good point, Chris.
We're about out of time, so make it really quick.
But for somebody, for a Christmas who necessarily may not be able to afford a drum set, you can kind of retrofit your existing set with a better nice snare.
Right.
And some,
all right, well, let's hear these beautiful snares as we roll our credits and arm yourselves,
Ready?
guys.
Here we go.
Come on.